This is the Asia Trade. I'm Shery in Tokyo.
I'm Avril in Singapore. Your top stories this hour. Asian stocks set for a positive start to the week after Wall Street's best day since May. Investors in this region also assessing election victories to ruling parties in Japan and Thailand. The yen in focus, with Japan's LDP securing a lower house supermajority, setting the stage for further fiscal stimulus from Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. We'll get reaction on the business and political impact from Amova Asset Management, AmCham Japan, the Asia Group, and a government lawmaker.
And I'm Haslinda Ahmed in Bangkok, where Thailand's ruling party is on track to triple its number of seats after Sunday's election, a win for the royalist establishment as voters seek stability.
Take a look at how Japanese assets are setting up after that resounding victory by Prime Minister Takaichi and her party. You can see Nikkei futures pointing to the upside of more than 2%. We're very much in focus on the Japanese yen. Of course, a little bit of weakness early in the Asian session, but the level that we're watching right now, 159.45 per dollar, that was reached mid-January. And remember, that was the weakest since 2024, although officials continue to emphasize that it's a volatility. The pace of currency moves, that is more important than at a specific level for the Japanese yen. You can see on the right side there the terminal chart showing the volatility remains elevated for the Japanese currency. But the topics had already reached a record high, and you can see Nikkei futures pointing to the upside. And we'll be watching some of those sectors that are in Takaichi's investment agenda. We're talking about defense, we're talking about nuclear, and of course JGB yields very important given the fiscal concerns that also continue here in Japan. Avril.
Absolutely, but not forgetting as well the handover that we got on Friday from Wall Street with that rebound from the midweek sell-off sparked by software names. And of course, we are seeing the AI infrastructure rally that is underway thanks to this big spending plans from the hyperscalers, including Amazon, and then further tailwind and propellant from the comments from Jensen Huang, the NVIDIA chief, about sky-high demand. So we are watching as well how Asia Tech fares today. Now, on top of that, we did get some notes from Goldman's trading desk. They say maybe the selling might not ease off this week given the algos that could be at work. They tend to follow the market direction rather than the fundamental drivers. Now, in the early goings, we are seeing the Australian benchmark tracking Wall Street's gains, keeping an eye on Brent as well, under pressure there following those US-Iran talks. But of course, the focus is on Japan, Shery.
Yeah, let's turn to our top story because Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has secured a historic election victory, positioning her as the nation's strongest leader of the post-war era. It's an outcome set to embolden Takaichi and could fuel market volatility on speculation surrounding further fiscal spending. Bloomberg senior editor Brian Fowler joins us for more on this. And what a victory, given especially, I was thinking yesterday with the heavy snowfall, the turnout could be a bit low, but look at these numbers.
Yeah, it is historic, Shery. I mean, 6 months ago, the LDP was completely on the ropes. It had lost its majorities in both houses of parliament and was muddling through the summer. And then Takaichi becomes the nation's first ever female prime minister in October. 4 months later, she secured the greatest election victory in the history, certainly in the post-war history. And she's going to become that much more assertive, I think, on the international stage, as well as domestically. We're going to have to see what she does with fiscal policy. That's what markets are waiting to see. And I think the reaction from markets is going to be a really interesting thing because she's not going to have any opposition within her party, but she has to watch markets.
We want to get to the markets, but for me, it was also interesting to see the turnaround because you mentioned October and she was struggling to just get the votes in order to become prime minister. And look at what happened now. So what changed?
Well, I think she did a great job selling her story. I mean, she's established herself as somebody who works very hard. She's everything she's achieved, she's done on her own. She's not coming from a family of, politicians like a lot of other politicians. And she's gotten things done very quickly. So I think she really captured the imagination of voters as this is someone who really can lead us at a time when the global stage is looking a little bit fraught with tensions. U.S. is not such a reliable partner as it has been in the past. China's becoming more assertive. North Korea is always a bit of a problem. So I think she really captured the imagination of voters as this is a leader we can really get behind. She's not going to let us down. That's my sense.
Brian, to your point earlier about markets, is that what's going to potentially be keeping her fiscal spending plans in check?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. So last night, the first thing she said about that was she wants to maintain a responsible fiscal attitude. That's not new, but it's interesting that she led with that before then saying that she will accelerate talks on possibly suspending the sales tax on food for 2 years. But food is a really big issue. We reported on Friday that in the G7, Japanese households spend a bigger portion of their total spending on food, which means they have less money for discretionary spending. And so if she can do this with the sales tax on food, it's going to help households really where they need it the most. So I think that was a policy that a lot of people were behind.
Bloomberg senior editor Brian Fowler here with the latest on the Japanese elections. Let's actually get more on the markets with Naomi Fink, chief global strategist at Amova Asset Management. Naomi, I mean, we're seeing a little bit of downside for the Japanese yen, but it doesn't seem to be at least catastrophic for now when it comes to the pace of potential losses that we could have seen with the supposed Takaichi trade. What are your expectations now that you've seen the outcome of the elections?
Well, what's interesting is that even though Takaichi won quite a lot of popular support, markets haven't voted yet. And so I think it's sensible to give Takaichi the benefit of the doubt, because after all, with such a victory, then there's also some political capital to spend. The campaign is over. Now she can stop campaigning and focus on the work of governing. And part of that work involves establishing a healthy dialogue with markets. And that's not just the stock market. It's also the bond market and foreign exchange. And it's a nuanced picture there. It also means projecting some fiscal responsibility over the long term, because after all, nobody expects Japan's fiscal books to collapse tomorrow. It's really about longer term credibility.
Suspension of food taxes for 2 years. I mean, the Prime Minister continues to insist that it will not involve issuing new government bonds. But is that feasible?
So I think the problem here is that there's a real potential for fiscal policy to sort of fight itself a little bit. What we are facing in Japan is a cost of living pressure. And while it may seem very simple to reduce taxes in order to fight that, really what we're also seeing is some pass-through in inflation. And so if it's really an inflation problem, it's the central bank's job to fight it. So any other measures may be somewhat temporary.
To be fair, when we talk about the central bank here in Japan, we talk about the fact that it's supposed to be independent. But how independent is the BOJ from the political environment, I guess is my question.
Well, I think to begin with, the BOJ's mandate is to ensure price stability. And I'm not really sure we can say that because the BOJ has moved with the government in the past, for example, under the Abe administration, that it is not independent. In fact, under the Abe administration, what Japan was facing was a deflationary economy, an extremely strong yen, higher unemployment. We don't have the labor supply shortages that we see today. So that was appropriate policy for its day. It's just that we're at a different day right now. And so appropriate policy looks somewhat different. So it's perhaps more nuanced than it was under Prime Minister Abe, where the clear decision was, the clear logic was to try and fight deflation. No, now we're in inflation. And then so we have a different policy mix that will be the optimal one.
That being said, Naomi, what are your assessments in terms of if the BOJ waits too long to normalize or continue on tightening? Does that present risk in itself in that down the road they would then have to normalize or tighten even more?
Well, right now, if we take a look at what too long means, we also have to probably bring into the conversation R-star or neutral rates. And that's not an exact number. It also depends on where inflation expectations sit. So the BOJ's job right now is probably to manage inflation expectations. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it acts the next meeting or it holds at any particular meeting. It means that it has to convince markets that it will continue raising rates until prices are stable again. And that can be done with a mix of rate rises, of communication, and also probably maintaining a healthy dialogue with the market and with the government.
To your point earlier about communication from the Japanese leadership to the markets, we're already also hearing from Katayama-san, maybe preemptively trying to reassure that they stand ready to talk to the markets if we see sharp moves on Monday. We already saw that sort of coordinated intervention between the US and Japan, that rate check. Is that enough to keep investors in check, you think?
Well, what's interesting is that probably the Ministry of Finance or rate checking and the Bank of Japan, they have two different duties here. On the Ministry of Finance side and tamping down the volatility, yes, it's about whether markets get unruly and disorderly. But from the Bank of Japan's perspective, it's looking a lot longer term. Is the weak yen inviting in inflation? And usually that happens when the yen weakens and stays weak. And that's sort of what we've seen so far. So I think we have potential, if we do see unruly markets, for the Ministry of Finance to take a closer look at the markets. But we also have potential for Bank of Japan to continue looking at the markets and where we are and whether it is actually an inflationary force. And it can still work into their calculus when they do shift rates.
Who are the winners right now from this sweeping mandate that Takaichi got in the markets, whether we're looking at sectors, whether we're looking at the JGB space as well?
So I think we can't forget that the Japanese economy really wasn't doing so badly in the first place. Yes, the main problem here is inflation, but that's a world away from the deflation that we were fighting under Abenomics. So the market was actually not doing so badly to begin with. I think that now I wouldn't necessarily say because of Takaichi's victory, but because of the underlying trend of reflation, of improving economy, and assuming that we are able to manage inflation, and I put the emphasis on Bank of Japan's role as the inflation fighter, then we can probably get some domestic demand names moving as well. I think we've got the expectation for a pretty good shunto this year as well. The wage price, healthy, virtuous circle is probably alive and well.
Yeah. Naomi, Fink, really good to have you with us, Chief Global Strategist at Amova Asset Management, as we continue to watch all of the market implications of the Japan elections. And of course, it's also earnings season, so we'll be watching some of those company results as well. We do have much more to come on the results of the vote. AmCham Japan and the former U.S. trade official join us for a discussion on the trade and business implications. Plus, we'll speak with an LDP lawmaker about Prime Minister Takaichi's plans for her mandate. We have more ahead on the Asia Trade. This is Bloomberg.
We have had the right people to tackle all those problems, and we think Thailand is now in a steady state, and we look forward to moving on with even a stronger cabinet and government.
Thai Prime Minister Anutin Chanwirakul speaking after his pro-royalist party clinched a surprisingly solid election win on Sunday. Live to Bangkok now, and Bloomberg Insight anchor Haslinda Amin joins us. Has unpacked the results for us and what this means for an era of political stability potentially in the country.
Avril, what a night, what a win, what a surprise. With about 90% of the votes counted, Boomjang Thai Party will likely secure about 191 seats out of the 500, which essentially is triple the number of seats it secured at the last election. Obviously, its messaging resonated with the voters. It campaigned on subsidies, on cash handouts, on investment in infrastructure, in tourism. It promised jobs in the rural areas. Now, these are bread and butter issues which have plagued Thais for a very long time now. They have been squeezed by the high cost of living. What Boomjai Thai Party didn't explain was how it would fund all the projects and all the spending that it intends to carry out. Still, a huge win from Boomjai Thai as well as its premier, the leader of the party, of course. We have Anutin, who's been a kingmaker. He's been essential to all the coalition partnerships we've seen in the country. He is close, not just to the military, but the royal family as well. And that some say would ensure that his party could stand the test of time, that he could potentially serve the full 4-year term. As you may already know, that it's been a rotating door here in Thailand. We've seen 10 prime ministers in the last 20 years. In fact, this election is the third in 7. Lots of questions on the longevity of the government that will be formed. Of course, it will be a coalition government. Boomjai Thai will have to seek other parties, including the likes of Pheu Thai, which is likely to be a partner to its coalition.
To your point, will the idea of policy continuity sit well with markets then?
Well, policy continuity is what the markets have been hoping for. It's a fractured economy. It is a fractured political environment. Continuity would bring some stability and perhaps bring back investors to the country. When you take a look at Thai stocks, they've been among the worst performers in the world. In fact, they were among the worst performers last year. Investors are waiting for clarity. And with the win, a strong win by the Boomjai Thai Party, investors may eventually come back to the country. Expectations are that the markets will do well from here. Stocks will see an upside. We potentially can see an upside for the currency as well, the Thai baht. And in fact, when it comes to the yields here in Thailand, that could be at a neutral position. But what remains to be seen is the long-term plan for the country. In the short and medium-term, stimulus would do well, but it needs structural reforms. And the Boomjai Thai Party has failed to commit to those structural reforms, which are a long time coming.
Has, thank you so much. Bloomberg Insights anchor Haslinda Amin. Now, some other global political stories we're following as well. Socialist Antonio José Seguro has won Portugal's presidency, defeating far-right challenger André Ventura in a runoff vote. Projections from public broadcaster RTP show Seguro taking up to 73% of the vote. The result is expected to ease tensions with the centre-right government and reduce the risk of institutional confrontation. The political future of UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is in crisis over the appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the US. That's after revelations over Mandelson's past ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Starmer's chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney, has quit, saying he takes full responsibility for advising Starmer to make the appointment. It leaves the Prime Minister increasingly exposed as calls grow for change at the top. Shery?
Take a look at how oil is trading early in the Asia session as we continue to factor in fading geopolitical premiums. We had seen Brent lose about 4% last week, but only after big surges in 2026, of course, all to do with the state of geopolitics, especially tensions around Iran. But Iran's president now describing Friday's nuclear talks with Washington as a step forward, insisting Tehran, though, won't give up its right to enrich uranium domestically. Let's get more with Bloomberg editor Michael Heath. Mike, so give us the latest on how these negotiations progressed.
Yeah, Shery. On Friday, there was talks in Oman between Iran's foreign minister and the U.S. envoys, which is Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. Basically, the Omani foreign ministers, shuttled between the two groups, sort of looking for compromise and looking at, both sides sort of feeling each other out for for a sense of how seriously they take the negotiations. Now, on both sides, it looks like it's been reasonably positive. As you mentioned, Iran's president came out saying that their sense was that the talks were respectful and the US is prepared to be reasonable there. And President Trump also saying they'd been good talks and he anticipated that there'd be more to come early this week. So that as you mentioned with the oil price, that sort of saw things ease off a little bit. But there is a bit of dissension about what's actually being discussed here. I mean, Iran only wants to talk about the nuclear issue, and the US had wanted to talk about ballistic missiles and sponsorship of proxy groups around Israel as well. But it seems like the US has agreed that it will just focus on the nuclear side. Iran's, as you mentioned, is saying, look, it's not going to be dictated to in what it can and can't do. But at the end of the day, the US has quite an armada, stationed in the Middle East. So there is a bit of a big stick hanging over this as well. So we'll have to see how that unfolds. Sort of another side to this too is that Prime Minister Netanyahu is due to go to Washington to sort of perhaps whisper a little bit in President Trump's ear about these negotiations too. So that's another factor that's feeding into it as well. But so far, so good.
I was just about to ask Mike, to what extent has the outcome of the talk so far disappointed Netanyahu, who probably wanted broader measures against Iran?
Yeah, Avril, and I think that's right. And we shouldn't underestimate how influential he can be here. I mean, recall that when the US and Israel attacked Iran in June last year, there were talks going on with the US too. So they're fairly important. And Israel, potentially, if things blows up, Israel will be on the receiving end of Iran's ballistic missiles. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu's view is Iran is on the ropes somewhat here. The US has the stick with its armada. They should widen it and try to get things sorted out with the ballistic missile programs, with the sponsorship of Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen as well, that threaten Israel persistently, and potentially US personnel as well. So he wants the US to go a bit harder there. It might be that he does stiffen their spine a bit, the US. We'll just have to see. The other thing that's gone on that I forgot to mention is the US has also tightened sanctions on Iran too. It's really wanting to squeeze the economy. And we saw those protests that took place in Iran. This is probably only going to exacerbate that in terms of government revenues and that sort of thing.
And in spite of this diplomatic progress between the US and Iran, what should we be watching in terms of still the potential for US military action at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, there's a school of thought that the US is going to go ahead with some sort of strike here. And I guess the main areas they'd look at would be missile launch pads and that sort of thing, where Iran could fire back on US personnel in the region and obviously on Israel as well. The other thing that's talked about is the IRGC, obviously the Revolutionary Guard Corps, who are very, very powerful and influential in the economy there, again, as a way to sort of target the elite, the beneficiaries of the regime. But in terms of actually targeting nuclear areas, it's very difficult because this is fairly dispersed across Iran. And after Israel and the US attack in June last year, it's probably even more dispersed. So that's going to be a hard one to track down.
Mike, thank you so much. Always appreciate your insights. Economy editor Michael Heath. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg. Quick look at how U.S. assets are faring following Friday's sharp rebound, which was pretty broad-based. We saw the Dow ending above 50K, and the likes of Goldman, though, thinking that the choppy trading might still continue this week. We'll watch for markets progression. This is Bloomberg.
And we're looking ahead to the market opens in Japan, and we're getting the latest when it comes to labor cash earnings coming in at 2.4% growth year on year, which is an acceleration from the previous month, but it's coming in slightly below expectations. Real cash earnings year on year take away inflation is a contraction of 0.1% for the month of December. Of course, these numbers very important because of the price pressures that we have seen in Japan, with inflation surpassing the BOJ's 2% inflation target for the past 3.5 years. We continue to watch the labor negotiations, the wage negotiations in the spring, Shunto, to come up. The expectation is for another solid gain when it comes to base pay. But we have already seen here in the Japanese economy that those wage earnings, the labor market has improved, hefty winter bonuses, higher minimum wages. And also when it came to the month of December, we did have an additional working day. So that leading to that bump when it comes to the labor cash earnings year on year, 2.4%, accelerating from the previous month of November. And take a look at the setup right now. We are seeing some weakness for the Japanese yen. 157 is the level. The one that we're watching right now is 159.45, which was achieved in mid-January. That was the weakest since 2024. And all to do, of course, with what are the expectations for the new Prime Minister Takaichi, as she's just won a sweeping mandate from this weekend's election. Let's actually take a look at the implications of the vote. Joining us now is Christopher LaFleur, chairman of AmCham Japan. Also with us is Asia Group Principal David Boling. He's a former Deputy Assistant U.S. Trade Representative for Japan. Great to have you both with us. Let me start with you, Chris, because, of course, we want to hear the reaction from businesses, what this resounding victory by the Prime Minister will mean when it comes to operating here in Japan.
Well, I think for foreign businesses operating in Japan, this is fundamentally good news in the sense that Takaichi has dedicated herself to re-energizing the Japanese economy with what she has termed responsible but proactive fiscal policy. And that is, we've seen in her first 3 months efforts to pursue this agenda, but those have been constrained greatly by the lack of a majority in either house of the Diet. With this very resounding victory in the lower house of the Diet, she now has the opportunity to forge ahead with her real program, and hopefully that will result in further economic growth in Japan and perhaps a more far-sighted vision about where Japan needs to go in the future.
And David, of course, some of that program that she wants to carry out is also a good relationship with the U.S. and implementing the U.S.-Japan trade deal. How much of a boost did she get in her negotiation and in her dealing with President Trump? She's expected to meet him in March as well.
That's right. Well, she starts off with a great relationship with President Trump. I mean, when she met him last October, they had tremendous chemistry. But what she lacked was political power. I mean, she was in a very tough situation at that time. That has completely changed. And now she approaches Trump not only with good chemistry, but a lot of political muscle. And I think he's going to respect that. But it also could increase expectations from the White House for her to be able to deliver on the trade deal, to be able to deliver on defense spending. And so that could put a bit more pressure on her. But overall, she's in a much better position when she visits the White House next month, and I'm sure she's going to start to turn her focus to that.
Yeah, in fact, President Trump now has congratulated the Prime Minister, saying that she's a very strong leader and, of course, really pointing to her landslide victory, saying that she's a highly respected and very popular leader of Japan, and Japan will always have his strong support. Avril, really strong words coming from the President just a few minutes ago.
Absolutely, Shery. And it does make you wonder as well, is there a flip side to this? Because, David, if I could just pick your brains on this, when it comes to how Japan and Takaichi-san, coming from a position of strength, now perhaps views the U.S. at a time where some of its security alliances, including with NATO, look a bit shaky.
Well, I mean, look, she wants to do what Trump wants Japan to do, and that is to spend more money on defense. And so I think they're aligned on that. I think she's already proven that she takes Japan's defense very seriously. She's moved up defense spending. She accelerated it, brought it up earlier than scheduled to 2% of GDP by the end of this fiscal year. I expect she will continue to push on that. She started the review of many national security documents. So I think the trajectory that she is on right now is something that the White House will welcome, and she'll be able to sit at the table with President Trump and say, look, Japan takes its own defense really seriously.
Chris, you mentioned earlier that this perhaps give more impetus to Takaichi-san in terms of pursuing her policies. Aside from the expansionary stance that she's expected to take, what else do businesses want to see, perhaps in the form of support at a time where they are still being affected by these tariffs?
Well, Takaichi's challenge going forward is that now she really owns the policymaking process in Japan. Up until now, she's had to compromise with others, and the results have always been constrained by that need for votes in the Diet. That constraint is no longer there, and so now she really owns the economic policy of Japan going forward. And if you look at her platform, there's really clearly some tension between the responsible side of fiscal policy versus the proactive side of fiscal policy. And in the resolution of that conflict is really the fate of this administration is really going to be determined. For the markets, clearly a more stimulatory fiscal policy is going to further boost economic growth. But on the flip side, it presumably also is going to reduce or put further pressure on the yen. And that's going to, in turn, drive inflation. And so Takaichi, in fact, although she does have this very powerful new majority in the lower house, still faces some quite daunting problems in trying to help Japan overcome a long period of deflation, which now has turned into a period of pretty dramatic inflation.
Right, Chris, what are some of the biggest concerns of businesses right now, given, as you mentioned, the dynamics in the markets right now? A weak Japanese yen, higher import costs, but at the same time, we had really those huge gyrations, the meltdown in JGBs that sent borrowing costs to record highs.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, there is always opportunity for business, whichever way things move. But on the whole, American companies in Japan are going to be looking for the administration to be investing in areas where better collaboration between the U.S. and Japan is very much possible. And we've seen in the program she has laid out in her early months that she's very focused on trying to move the Japanese economy into the future with investing in areas such as pharmaceuticals, actually a wide range of areas from pharmaceuticals to defense to shipbuilding. So there's a lot of opportunity here for U.S. and Japanese companies to work together to fulfill that agenda.
Dave, we already have seen an incredible focus on defense stocks, on nuclear stocks, artificial intelligence related, anything here in Japan as well. Is there any sector that you're watching more carefully that could sort of reflect Takaichi's policies and mandate next?
Well, I think it's very important to remember that Takaichi has a track record here. She was the economic security minister. So I think she's going to focus a lot on those types of sectors that she wants to beef up for Japan. And then if you look at the U.S.-Japan investment agreement, it sets out the sectors: semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, critical minerals, AI, quantum computing, all of that. And those are the types of deals that are now being discussed and will probably be rolled out pretty soon in anticipation of her trip to the U.S. To push the investment deals forward. We have to remember, Trump calls himself tariff man for a reason, and tariffs are hanging over that investment deal, and she certainly wants to come to Washington, D.C. with some finalized deals.
At the same time, David, I wonder as well, what is your assessment of the extent in which this mandate is going to affect the way in which Takaichi deals with the pressure that's coming from China? Do you see shifts and changes there in the form of a Japan that's bolder, more assertive, more outspoken? What shape or form might that take?
Well, I mean, we know that Takaichi is a hawk. She has a strong reputation for that. But at the same time, I do not think she wants to escalate tensions with China. On the China side, I mean, China made a bad bet here, right? They tried to isolate Takaichi after her comments on the diet floor last November, and that did not pay off. It was it's quite clear. But I think what China has to do now is accept the fact that she's here to stay. And there's going to have to be some sort of recognition of that and to work with her. I don't expect that to happen anytime soon. And also, she has no reason to back down, right? There's no political urgency for her to back down from her statements. So I think it's going to take some time, and I imagine that the relationship will frankly remain a bit frosty here for the coming months.
David, how do you see this convincing victory by Takaichi sort of changing Japan's role in the global stage, just even beyond U.S.-Japan relationship, but really the positioning of Japan as being back as a leader in the world?
Yes, and I do think this is really important to remember that Takaichi, and I went to some of her campaign rallies, she really is effective as a communicator and bringing out the hope in the Japanese public. And you could see the Japanese public was responding to that. They want a more muscular Japan, a more assertive Japan. And I do think that she has the credentials and has the vision to be able to lead Japan to be more of an influential player on the world stage. And that will be welcomed, particularly by many countries here in the region.
David Boling, really good to have you here with us in the Tokyo studio. He's a former USTR Deputy Assistant for Japan and Principal at the Asia Group, and also Christopher LaFleur, Chairman of AmCham Japan. Great to have you both in this conversation. Thank you. We do have much more ahead on Japan's election landslide. We'll speak next hour to a lawmaker from the Prime Minister's ruling LDP. The Hudson Institute also breaking down the foreign trade and investment implications, plus views from Monex Group and the Council on Foreign Relations. Catch Japan Ahead every Monday at 8:40 a.m. If you're watching in Tokyo, subscribers can also watch live on the terminal using the TV Go function. This is Bloomberg. And we're checking some of the stocks that we'll be watching when trade opens here in Japan. Of course, it's not just the astounding election victory from Prime Minister Takaichi, but it's also earnings season, and Tokyo Electron raising its full-year outlook despite missing estimates on quarterly profit. The chip equipment maker saying it's seeing a surge in spending from chip makers looking to capitalize on the AI boom. It says demand for DRAM manufacturing equipment particularly strong, and the momentum should continue for several years. Let's get more with Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Industry Analyst Masahiro Wakasugi. Masahiro, so what were some of the key takeaways in the results?
Yes, regarding Tokyo Electron, we think that its forecast for the wafer fab equipment spending forecast in 2026 was one of the very much key focus, and they are saying that wafer fab equipment market WFE will grow around more than 15% year over year in 2026. And its closest peer, Lam Research, is expecting 23% WFE growth in 2026. So the market seems to be thinking about what the difference between two companies' forecast. And the one reason is that probably the customers' facility is not ready yet. So because the demand is surging quite suddenly since maybe last November. So the customers' capacity expansion may not be as fast as Tokyo Electron expects. So that kind of the reason why they are kind of expecting a little bit lower WFE market forecast. So that was pretty much the big focus in the earnings.
So, Masa, is this all going to be enough for investors to look past the potential for boom and bust that we tend to see in some of these chip cycles?
Yes, I think basically we hear the strong demand from the AI customers, and of course we have to very much watch the situation. For example, like Amazon will increase the capex in 2026, and that's good for the NVIDIA and also the supply chain to TSMC and also Tokyo Electron. And on the other hand, the market is closely monitoring how maybe the hyperscalers can generate sufficient returns from that kind of big investment going forward. So we have to see the balance between the capex increase from the hyperscalers and also demand increase for the chip equipment makers, including Tokyo Electron.
What are some of the big trends that you're seeing in the Asian chip makers? Because the market seemed to move with any comment coming from Jensen Huang, right? I think he talked about how AI demand is still very strong, but at the same time, understanding that disruptions that artificial intelligence will cause also led to that huge sell-off in software makers. So are there any trends for you that you're watching closely across Asia right now?
I think that if we look at the software areas, it maybe we can, partly say that the software companies' profit may the growth rate could decelerate, but this is caused by the maybe AI, which means that probably we think that the NVIDIA or some AMD they can supply enough chips for the AI, meaning that the chip equipment makers can benefit from that kind of AI expansion. So on the one hand, the software companies may face the maybe revenue deceleration, but that's partly good for the industry because they can cut the cost to sufficiently operate the daily operations. So in that sense, the AI market should grow going forward. So we think that maybe AI may be causing some disruptions, but which is one of the reason why AI is expanding so rapidly. So I don't have very big concern for the hardware space.
Masahiro Wakasugi, always great to get your insights and context. Bloomberg Intelligence senior industry analyst. As we continue to watch this tech space, we do have SoftBank earnings this week as well. So we'll be discussing that in just a minute. This is Bloomberg. We do have breaking news out of Japan. We are getting the current account surplus narrowing for the month of December, coming in at 728.8 billion yen. It's coming in below expectations as well from economists, not to mention that it's narrowing from more than 3 trillion yen in the previous month. The trade balance, also the surplus coming in at 134.9 billion yen, which is lower than economists had expected. We will continue to watch the trade numbers specifically, given that, of course, we are also following the latest on U.S.-Japan negotiations and Prime Minister Takaichi's visit to the White House in March, as she has now achieved that really historic landslide victory in the election over the weekend. It's also earnings season here in Japan. SoftBank set to report third quarter results this week. For a preview, let's bring in Bloomberg's Japan equities reporter Alice French. And Alice, of course, SoftBank Corp is today. We do have SoftBank Group later in the week as well. What are you watching?
Yeah, look, SoftBank Group earnings are always interesting, right? Because SoftBank, really more so than its own earnings, it's kind of become this proxy for OpenAI specifically, but also kind of AI sentiment in Japan's market. Now, we have recently had news that, SoftBank might be looking into an additional investment into OpenAI, potentially an extra $30 billion. Now, of course, investors will be watching for any kind of language from management around those numbers. And it's a difficult time sentiment-wise for AI, right? As Wakasugi-san was just saying, of course, people are excited about the potential for AI, but at the same time, all of these big companies really pumping in so much money. And I think investors are starting to think, when will we actually see tangible returns? And I think we've kind of seen that sentiment reflected in SoftBank's stock price in sort of recent weeks and months. So I think they're really going to have to come out with both something very exciting, but also something that can kind of reassure investors that all of this is worth it and they're not kind of throwing money away.
A reassurance, Alice, for some of the automakers, given what Toyota showed us, and then we have Nissan and Honda coming up as well. The extent in which for these automakers, the weaker yen is going to help offset some of the risks from tariffs.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? With Toyota's earnings on Friday, of course, we saw a pretty good showing. We know that they had record sales last year in 2025, and they raised that forecast on Friday too. A lot of this does seem to be on tailwinds from the weak yen, which is helping to kind of offset some of that downside pressure from tariffs, of course. Now, one would expect that that will also play through to sort of Honda and Nissan as well. Interestingly, we also saw that leadership change from Toyota as well, right? Seems like they are trying to focus more on profitability, more on shareholder returns. Of course, the weak yen, again, a big focus under Takaichi. Many investors expecting it could even weaken to the kind of 159, 160 mark in the coming days. And, you know, if so, that's a pretty big deal. Of course, it's good news for the exporters, but less so for, you know, the average consumer on the ground here in Japan. And of course, we may start to hear kind of mention of intervention, possibly if we reach those levels. So the yen is going to be in focus, and it's an interesting week for automakers to be reporting because, as you say, they are sort of one of the biggest beneficiaries.
Alice French, Bloomberg's Japan equities reporter. Really great to get your take as we head to the market opens in Japan. And as Alice mentioned, really the Japanese yen in focus, 159, 160 is the level that we're watching, especially 159.45, which was reached in mid-January, the weakest since 2024. We're also watching JGBs. They were sort of stable last week, but remember, we had that meltdown in January, and we're again focused on Takaichi's expansionary fiscal policy. But what a sweeping mandate and a historic landslide victory that she achieved over the weekend. This was the first time for her party, the LDP, to gain as many seats as they did, and the ruling coalition now having more than 350 seats, which means they have a super majority that can really override a veto in the upper house. We're looking forward to the market opens here in Tokyo, also in Seoul next. This is Bloomberg. This is Asia Trade. We're counting down to Asia's major market opens. After some calm has returned to the U.S. markets, Avril, we saw U.S. stocks rising, tech stocks gaining ground. But of course, we are also reacting to elections over the weekend from Thailand, Portugal, and of course, here in Japan, a supermajority achieved by Prime Minister Takaichi and her ruling LDP.
Absolutely. The extent in which this is going to fuel the Takaichi trade at a time where there are concerns about Japan's fiscal spending. We are already seeing some early reaction in the JGB space, Shery.
Yeah, we have seen that momentum in the Takaichi trade. Sell JGB, sell Japanese yen, but buy Japanese stocks has been the trade so far. And now with this historic landslide victory by the Prime Minister, we are watching the reaction as the market opens. We have seen some early weakness for the Japanese yen, but what we're watching is a level 159.45, which was achieved around mid-January, which was the lowest since 2024. We'll continue to watch the JGB space, 10-year yields at that 228 level. We had seen a little bit more calm returning to the JGB space last week. But remember, we had a massive meltdown just in January. And with these fiscal concerns, of course, about what Prime Minister Takaichi's new mandate will mean for her expansionary policy will be key to watch. But you can see early in the session already some upside for the Nikkei and the Topics. And the Topics is already at a record high. We're talking about 8% of gains in the past year or so for the Japanese index as well. The yen holding at that 157 level. And we're also digesting digesting some of the latest current account surplus that widened less than expected. They actually narrowed a little bit. We're also digesting some of those labor cash earnings numbers as well for an indication, of course, of where the Bank of Japan might go from here. Take a look at how South Korea is also coming online. We had seen some pressure for the Korean stock market, pressure for the Korean won. We have seen a lot of foreign outflows, and you can see right there a little bit of a rebound early in the Asian session as the Korean won is still weakening against the US dollar at the 14.65 level.
Shery, take a look at how we are shaping up on U.S. assets following the powerful rebound, which was pretty broad-based on Friday, led by tech. But also we saw those small caps clawing back, the Dow above 50K. Trump now talking about 100K on the Dow Jones Industrial Average before his term ends. And we are seeing futures on the S&P 500 pointing to further U.S. stock upside. Pressure, though, on the U.S. Treasuries, maybe a bit of a read-through from Japan. We are seeing further pressure also when it comes to oil prices following those U.S.-Iran talks. There's certainly a lot to unpack. Joining us now is Charu Chanana, Chief Investment Strategist at Saxo. So, Charu, talk to us first about your instant reaction from the strong election result for Takaichi-san, now a supermajority. How much is left for markets to price in terms of spending? And is that going to provide a sort of check to how much she can actually push through?
I think before we go on to spending, certainly what is very interesting is the supermajority and how that could bring a lot of policy clarity, right? This is something Japan has not seen for many, many years now. So I think certainly, if you look at it from a risk-on perspective, this does spell some kind of risk-on for Japanese markets, right? But if we were to really get into what her policies could look like, we know she's been talking about massive fiscal spending, a lot of focus in defense and semiconductors and nuclear and things like that. So certainly watching out for what kind of announcements we get. I think there is, with this kind of a majority, some room for flexibility in that government so that we do not spook the bond markets and bring out this massive pressure on the yen, as we've also seen in the last few years now. So certainly I think while the markets are really positioning for that massive fiscal spending, I think it is time to understand that this supermajority does mean that they will have a lot of room to be more flexible and pace out those kinds of announcements in a way that it does not impact the markets negatively.
We're hearing already from Japan's chief currency currency chief. He's the highest level official when it comes to the finance ministry, when it comes to the yen policy. Atsushi Mimura speaking right now, saying that he will be watching the forex and market moves very closely, that they're constantly communicating with the market and that they're watching market moves with a high sense of urgency. And of course, we have heard this sort of rhetoric before, high sense of urgency when we're talking about the Japanese yen, of course, weakening against the US dollar. But you can see right now a little bit of a rebound for the yen as the market gets underway here in Japan, really topping that 156 level against the greenback. Charu, the concern right now was because of the sweeping mandate that the Prime Minister got, that her expansionary fiscal policies could lead to more concerns about the fiscal health of the country by investors, especially with the JGB meltdown that we saw back in January. What are the risks of that still happening?
Absolutely. I think the focus on fiscal spending will continue, but my sense is only that what Takaichi cannot ignore at this point will be the cost of living pressures. And with that, obviously, does come this kind of a focus on the yen, where that goes. Also, in terms of the relationships with the U.S., I do think that they're in a position to continue to, position the yen in a way where they can get the support from the U.S. as well to bring it where they want to see it. At least in the terms of the direction and the volatility. So certainly, I think while those fiscal measures are likely to continue, that is the whole reason we went into this kind of an election, to get a stronger mandate for those kinds of, push that she wants to do. But at the same time, I don't think this will be done completely at the cost of the bond market or the yen itself.
That's a really interesting point you raise about how, with this stronger mandate, they can more coherently orchestrate whatever fiscal policy they're trying to push through. What is your sense, though, about what the implications for the BOJ are going to be as we have gotten past this election? Yeah. Maybe the focus shifts to Shunto next.
It does, absolutely. For BOJ, it's absolutely important to see where the wages go. But also, of course, I'm sure they're keeping an eye on the yen as well. And I wouldn't, I mean, of course, there's an expectation that the Takaichi administration wants the BOJ to slow down its normalization process. But on the opposite, again, I think cost of living pressures will be a very important thing that Takaichi keeps in mind at this point, because that's really the reason, her popularity can stick. With having said that, I mean, there is a reason to believe that the BOJ could continue on its path of normalization. In fact, even, pace it out a little bit more, because there is that, strong majority within the administration now to counter any side effects that it might bring. So again, a BOJ which is tightening and a fiscal policy that is loosening is an environment that is very much possible to adhere to in Japan right now.
So where does this leave the yen by the end of the year, you think?
I think Japanese yen certainly has room for recovery, because with everything going on in Japan right now, we're also getting into in the US into a new Fed administration, and I think there is going to be a little bit more pressure to cut rates from the Fed side. So with these two measures together, I do think the Japanese yen could be a little bit stronger. I mean, we of course have massive short positioning in the yen right now. If we were to get those bouts of strength, I'm also watching out for any kind of short squeezes that we can get here. But I think by the end of the year, we could certainly go towards 140 on dollar yen.
At the moment, we're getting the Nikkei 225 surging about 3%. This after, of course, a landslide victory that Prime Minister Takaichi achieved over the weekend. But Charu, when it comes to some of the risks for the Japanese markets and economy, what are you watching at a time when we're also seeing rising geopolitical tensions, right? I mean, we have seen Prime Minister Takaichi's comments around Taiwan not sitting well with China, and that still continues.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a few risks to watch out for this whole momentum story that we've seen in Japan for quite a few years now, with those corporate governance reforms helping, Warren Buffett really going into that market as well. So we have seen foreign investors also coming into the Japan markets. But now, of course, with this new geopolitical environment that we are in, it does remain like, a market which might be more of selectivity than of broad index exposure, for example. Things like, the focus on defense, for example, on AI and semiconductors, focus on nuclear perhaps, and, just the whole capex, strategic capex sectors. I think those could continue to do well, especially as we move along that path of fiscal stimulus. And of course, I mean, if we were to see that strengthening of the yen, that could come to bite the exporters, for example. So this is not a market where you could just, have a broad exposure now and sit back. I think is certainly going to be a little bit more volatile, and selectivity will be really key here.
Yeah, selectivity also in the AI space, where ordinarily on a day like this, following the Wall Street rebound, we would be talking about AI. Do you think in that sense, Japan's AI-related stocks stand out against what we're seeing in the rest of Asia? And how do you position at the time where, almost every week or almost daily, we get these new developments and tools that are reshaping the way we position?
Yeah, absolutely. What's going on in the AI space is very, very interesting, because, the market's questioning two things. The market's questioning the massive amounts of hyperscaler capex. They're scared that may need to be pulled back because the demand would slow down at some point. But at the same time, we're also fearing risks of AI disruption and saying that it's going to completely change a lot of the things that we do on a daily basis. Now, both can't be true, right? If that disruption has to happen, the capex has to continue to be expanded. And if capex is going to pull down, the disruption is not going to be of the same amount that the market started to price at one point last week, right? So I think the AI story, as you said rightly, it is a more selective story. And when you start to be selective, you do go into some of the more value AI plays after a lot of money has been rushed into those mega caps in the US. And then again, of course, when you look at the value plays, Japan does come out to be as one of the standouts, right? It's not somewhere which has been massively overpriced. Like, for example, what we've seen in Korea, again, the flows has been massive, even though structurally Korea AI story looks very strong, but just because of the positioning, there could be some risk this year. Same in US as well. So Japan looks like a more value AI play in that sense.
Charu, Chanana, really good to have you with us. Chief Investment Strategist at Saxo. We continue to watch the Japanese markets, especially when it comes to financial institutions. They're all gaining more than 2% at the moment. Of course, the growth as stimulus-led strategy by Prime Minister Takaichi might be sitting well with investors in these financial institutions, not to mention that we are just coming off the earnings season, and they had pretty solid results. Of course, the BOJ's normalization path of hiking rates, the expectation right now for the first one to be in July this year, also leading to more optimistic bets on these financial companies. But let's discuss what happened over the weekend in the landslide victory by Prime Minister Takaichi and her Liberal Democratic Party. Bloomberg senior editor Brian Fowler joins us for more on this really historic, resounding election victory by Prime Minister Takaichi, and what a change and turnaround from her just struggling to become Prime Minister back in October.
Yeah, so it is very historic, and it's a massive turnaround for the LDP and for Takaichi. The LDP, of course, was on the ropes all through the summer, having lost its second majority in Parliament. And Takaichi emerged as a leading candidate, but she wasn't a unanimous candidate for Prime Minister, but she got that job. And once she got in that position, she established herself as somebody who works very hard. She says that, but I think she really does it. She's studying all the time. She moves very quickly. She made the alliances she needed to in order to regain the majority. And I think she really captured the imagination of Japanese voters as somebody who will say things and actually follow through. Her talk about accelerating talks about suspending the sales tax on food purchases, I think, resonated at a time when Japanese are spending an increasing portion of their income on food. And so I think really that's really what did it. It's just she was seen as somebody who can get things done.
Brian, how quickly do you think she can put through some of these measures as promised, such as the suspension of the food sales tax?
Yeah, so we'll see the Diet reconvene on February 18th, and the first order of business will be for them to reaffirm her as Prime Minister. And she has already said, she signaled that she's not going to change her cabinet, no cabinet reshuffle. So then they can get on to the business of passing the national budget for the coming fiscal year. I think at the same time, she will start those talks on suspending the sales tax on food. We'll see where it goes. There are two ways to look at this supermajority. On the one hand, she's got the mandate she needs to pretty much do whatever she thinks she needs to do. On the other hand, she's not desperate. She doesn't need to please people by risking the country's fiscal situation. And that's what Charu said a few minutes ago, I think was spot on. I think she's got room to take the steps she really thinks she needs to do without risking turmoil in the financial markets.
Could that include a constitutional revision?
It could. It very well could. And she's talked about doing this, and she's very forthright in saying she wants an assertive Japan in terms of defense and everything else. And I think she could do that. Abe had talked about it in the past, and she's a protege of Abe's. And so it could be that she'll be able to do what he wasn't able to do.
Bloomberg senior editor Brian Fowler here with the latest on the Japanese elections. And of course, subscribers can also turn to the terminal for more on this. TLIV Go is your function for the latest updates. You also get commentary and analysis from our expert editors. And we're also in earnings season here in Japan, so do keep an eye on some of those stocks that we're watching, especially in the semi space, given, of course, the huge rally that we saw on Friday in the semiconductor chip makers in the United States. We're seeing broad upside together with the broader markets here in Japan. But Tokyo Electron had also come out with earnings, raising their full year outlook for operating profit to 593 billion yen. They're seeing really strong demand for equipment to make DRAM. So that's really leading to some positive sentiment, really adding to that rally that we saw on Friday in the U.S. This is Bloomberg.
It's Jobs Day, and Bloomberg has the report under surveillance.
Where's the emphasis, on headline payrolls or on the unemployment rate?
I'm focused on the unemployment rate, as is the market.
Wednesday, Jonathan, Lisa, Anne-Marie, and Mike will bring you crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed.
What we're seeing is certainly a growing labor force.
A labor market that actually could be improving.
The January Jobs Report, Wednesday on Bloomberg.
We have had the right people to tackle all those problems, and we think Thailand is now in a steady state, and we look forward to moving on with even a stronger cabinet and government.
Thai Prime Minister Anutin Chanvirakul, speaking after his pro-royalist party clinched a surprisingly solid election win on Sunday. Live now to Bangkok, where our Bloomberg Insight anchor Haslinda Amin joins us. So Has, we are seeing this surprisingly strong election victory for the ruling party.
Well, that's right. A stunning victory from Boom Jai Thai Party and the man you saw on your screen, Anutin. Remember, this party has been around for about 20 years, but until now, it's just played a supporting role. This time round, it will be calling the shots. It will decide which parties will join it in this coalition government. So a reversal of fortune, so to speak. Avril, almost 90% of the votes already counted, and Boom Jai Thai is expected to garner at least 191 seats of the 500, triple what it garnered at the last election. It is significant, and it is down to the campaigning. It resonated, its messages resonated with the people. It talked about providing cash handouts, subsidies, jobs in the rural areas. It talked about investing in infrastructure, in tourism, which, by the way, is the backbone of the economy. This is essential. This is an economy that is struggling. People are suffering from high cost of living. So promises of help is what people are looking for. So the messaging resonated. Anutin has played a key role in all of this as well. Remember, he is a deal maker. As Prime Minister, he took a very hard stance against Cambodia in their border disputes, and that's prompted a wave of nationalistic sentiment across the country, and some say that has worked in his favor. He also has very strong ties with the military, strong ties with the royal family. In fact, we saw pictures of him meeting up with the king on the eve of the election. That is a powerful message for the people. And some say that that support from these institutions, entrenched institutions, will bode well for the Boom Jai Thai Party as it tries to form this coalition government.
What could we see in terms of political reform, especially given the country's military-drafted constitution?
Well, political reform is going to be hard to come by. In fact, as part of this election, the voters also had a referendum to decide whether or not they want to see a change in the Constitution. A resounding 60% of the voters said yes. Herein lies a very interesting picture. In the closed and medium term, people want no change. They want stability. But in the longer term, they do want to see change in their constitution. Now, this constitution was charted back in 2017 under a government that was appointed by the military. Clauses in this constitution gives powerful, power to unelected institutions, which have dictated pretty much the politics in the country. But change will be hard to come by. This coalition government will have to decide how it wants to pursue this change. It will take years. Some say it may even not happen within the next 4 years. So as much as the people want change, it will be quite a challenge for it to implement that change in this constitution, Shery.
Speaking of change, I guess it's not lost on anyone that this was only a clear defeat for the progressives. Where does this leave their initiatives, their agenda, the progressive push in the country?
Well, progress is going to hard to come by because it is led pretty much by traditionalists, conservatives. We saw how the People's Party, in fact, underperformed. It didn't perform as well as some projections had been in the lead up to the election. They said they will regroup, they will rethink. They are disappointed, but hope is not lost yet. Of course, the People's Party represent the aspirations of the young people who want to see change, but that will take some time from here.
Has, great reporting. Thank you so much. Bloomberg Insights anchor Haslinda Amin. And you can explore live streaming news and interviews as well as all Bloomberg TV shows, documentaries, reporter analysis, and more in one place. Check it out at bloomberg.com/videos. Shery?
And take a look at some of the biggest movers in the Japanese session after the historic landslide victory by Prime Minister Takaichi and her party. You can see some of those big moves around some of those tech names, especially after we saw those gains in the Wall Street session last week and the rebound, the big rebound that we saw in those semiconductor names as well. You see Hitachi up more than 7%. And we do have earnings coming from SoftBank Corp today, SoftBank Group also on Thursday. So we'll be watching for some of its AI calls and investments around artificial intelligence and how that moves the stock and the broader markets as well. Advantage up more than 13%. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
Time for a look at the key economic events to watch this week. We get some potentially market-moving data releases out of the U.S., including the delayed January jobs numbers, as well as a fresh inflation reading. Hiring is expected to pick up, while core inflation could tick higher in a key test for the Fed outlook. China's price data out Wednesday set to offer an early read on the economy's start to the year. Economists expect headline CPI to soften on base effects, while firmer global commodity prices should help ease producer price deflation. And we get India's January inflation numbers on Thursday. Bloomberg Economics expects CPI to have moved back into the central bank's target range due to narrowing food deflation. Shery?
And let's get some of Japan market calls that we're following today. Mizuho Securities saying that the yen is biased to weaken following Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's decisive electoral victory. The bank's strategist notes that expectations of proactive fiscal policy in the near term may encourage short-term yen selling. Similarly, the Bank of New Zealand saying that the election results reinforced the outlook for soft yen and pressure on long-term JGBs. Citigroup on the stock market now saying that Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 could rally to 57,000 with the broader topics reaching 3,800 in the near term. It's interesting to note that both levels have already been breached with the gains from just early this morning. Analysts saying that the election outcome should reignite the Takaichi trade. They think defense, AI, chips, energy, and nuclear power shares stand to benefit, while financials could also see tailwinds. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
Here's another look at Japan assets following on from this resounding election victory for Takaichi-san. You're seeing stocks going gangbusters, almost 5% higher on the benchmark, a bit firmer on the yen versus the greenback. In terms of JGBs, what's interesting is the pressure you're seeing towards the front end of things that's perhaps coming in a bit more than the longer end. To help us make sense of all this, Bloomberg M Life strategist Mark Cranfield joins me in the studio. So Mark, what's going on with the curve in Japan?
Well, there was a lot of bad news priced into the very long end of the Japanese curve. That's not something which happened in the last few days. That's been going on over months. And we saw particularly with the so-called super longs, that's the 10, 20, 30, 40-year sector of the curve, really underperforming dramatically. Expected fiscal expansion in Japan, more defense spending, but all these things were known pretty much in advance. And you always have the risk that when you get to a major event, when certain themes are so clear in advance, investors don't always get what they expect on the other side of it. So going into this election, it was you buy Japanese equities, you short the yen, you short Japanese curve everywhere. That's all been known, that's all happened. Now Takaichi has a very strong win. She can start to reassess things in a slightly different way. And positioning is already very skewed, as we've just been discussing. The Bank of Japan already, we had the comments from one of the BOJ members just last Friday, which were much more hawkish than they have been recently, suggesting that they are getting ready to move earlier in terms of an interest rate hike. Now, the conventional wisdom is that Takaichi is against the BOJ hiking interest rates, but they did in December. She already pushed that forward, and that would be the expected election theme. Now she's in place, things might be a little bit different, because we've seen again that inflation is very sticky. We just had the cash earnings numbers out today. Japanese workers are not keeping up with inflation in terms of their pay rises. This is something that they've managed to skirt that for the election, but now they probably can address it. So allowing an early BOJ rate hike is something we should start to get used to, that idea. April is certainly on the cards now. It's not fully priced into the market, but you can expect more BOJ speakers to be pushing in that direction. It will need a very big pushback from the Japanese leadership, from Takaichi, from the finance minister as well. That might not come. Investors may see them gradually allowing a rate hike to come.
Is that going to provide any help or a boost to the yen then?
Most certainly. And this is where, again, pricing may have become too skewed in one direction. People have got very used to the idea that shorting the yen is a simple trade to do. Everyone wins it all the time. It's now a lot priced in. We've already seen there was a rate check from the Federal Reserve just 2 weeks ago. Clearly, the US authorities are becoming a little bit anxious that the Japanese themselves were allowing a bit of benign neglect of the currency. They weren't really doing very much to push back against it. But the election was coming. It's now out of the way. Japanese authorities can look at the fundamentals are starting to turn in the yen's favour. They do have a current account surplus. A lot of countries don't. The rate yield gap between the yen and some of its G10 peers is narrowing. It has been narrowing for some time. So you can't say that the yen is a clear one-way bet to decline anymore. Things are changing its favour. It would only need the Japanese authorities to be a little bit more supportive of the currency, the Bank of Japan to be a little bit more hawkish. Suddenly the picture could change a lot. And that's even without actual intervention.
You talked about some of the G10s. I wonder also, given the risks surrounding the front or the shorter end of things, or maybe even the 10 years, what should we be watching in terms of ripple effects in global debt?
The biggest risk really is between about 2 to 10 year sector of the Japanese curve. That's where, if people get more serious that the Bank of Japan is going to speed up interest rate hikes. So don't forget, they've been talking about neutral rates of being higher than 1% in the, say, 1.25%, 1.5% range. The official rate is only 0.75 at the moment. There's plenty of room for them to raise rates. They still wouldn't be at the inflation rate, which is still tracking way above 2. So there's the short end of the curve, which is vulnerable. That would make a flattening of the curve. And other countries around the world have to take notice of that, because like the ECB, for example, is on neutral at the moment. It would surely affect German yields as well. It would start to affect other Europeans and possibly even the UK, which is thinking about lowering interest rates. The one that isn't is Australia. They're starting to go the other way. But the ripple effects would be across the G10 landscape.
Mark, always great to get your sense of the markets and helping us to make sense of all this. Mark Cranfield of Bloomberg MLive. Shery?
Yeah, let's actually discuss and go a little bit more in depth on the political landscape here in Japan. Our next guest is a lawmaker representing the Liberal Democratic Party. Matsukawa previously served as Parliamentary Vice Minister of Defense and Vice Minister for the Parliamentary Cabinet Office. She joins me here in the Tokyo studio. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I mean, we spoke last time when Prime Minister Takaichi was still struggling to form a coalition. She was still struggling to become Prime Minister at that point. This is a historic landslide victory. What changed?
Yes. Well, it's really historic. I think this is the largest, votes the LDP alone received from the people in the history. And then I think her popularity rate is unprecedented, extremely high. And especially for the young people, and then also the non-partisan people, like who doesn't really pay attention to the politics, they are now turned to seeing the Takaichi-san as a new leader who can change Japan in a very positive manner.
Yeah, I think she had, about 90% support rate from young voters or something like that going into the elections. But does this mean then that that suspension of the sales tax for 2 years, it's a given at this point?
Yeah, of course, we have to. The next step is we are going to have the national board with the other parties together to discuss and then formulate the designing of and also schedule of the tax cut reduction, consumer tax reduction. But I think since we have 2/3, and then I think Prime Minister Takaichi herself is very keen on this issue, especially for the food and then the vegetable and all these necessary items. So I think that will go pretty smoothly.
I want to talk a little bit more about the fiscal concerns, but also just about her resounding victory. Does this also put on the table constitutional revision at this point?
Yes, I think in the due course, I would say, because constitutional reform is a really important issue, but it needs people's consensus. You shouldn't really divide the nation for this issue. Plus, I think the more urgent policies are still awaiting before the constitutional reform, such as recovering the economy in the first place, and also making the defense capability stronger. So the other issues needs to be tackled before, I think.
And those issues, the economy, defense, then do you expect perhaps more pushback, especially from investors when it comes to fiscal spending, just because of the concerns around the health of the economy? Or could the victory actually allow investors to be a bit more calm to whatever Prime Minister Takaichi has in store?
Well, in the middle, but I would say the latter, because I think we need to, we means the LDP and our government needs to explain more, I think, convincing manner that the responsible, proactive fiscal policy that Prime Minister Takaichi is proclaiming is not a reckless fiscal policies at all. It's responsible because, for example, take the example that the issuance of the national deficit bond, the amount has decreased from the previous government. So it's not, the direction itself is not like reckless, unresponsible, fiscal policy, but it's more like choosy about where the government will invest. It's more strategic, like AI, quantum computing, space, or like shipping. So, yes, we will spend, no hesitance for spending unnecessary area, but we will also cut off the unnecessary subsidies, or we will be very choosy. So we need to explain more about the concept, and then reassure the investors to see our fiscal balance is not unhealthy, and also we are very strategically minded. Then I think the market will understand what GOJ wants to do.
Rui, you talk about fiscal policy, talk to us about foreign policy as well. You, as a former diplomat, how do you see, perhaps given this convincing victory for Takaichi-san, has that perhaps opened a door and a shift towards how she's perceived on the global stage?
The agenda is stronger and more prosperous Japan. And the stronger part is not only defense but economy. But I think strong Japan can serve the region much better. Now that the U.S. already announced the national strategy that they will focus on the Western Hemisphere, so each region needs to be taken care by the regional countries, which means Japan needs to take care of its own region. And I think we will be more independent and more creative about strengthening the partnership with the regional countries or the countries which share the strategic interest. So I think the strong Japan and then the strong leadership, Japanese leadership, will serve the region for peace and stability more.
What do you see as the outlook for U.S.-Japan trade ties, especially as the two leaders, Trump, Takaichi, are also set to meet?
Oh, yes. We're expecting we can show a very strong tie between Japan and the U.S. Japan-US alliance stays very strong, or even more stronger, that will also serve the stability of the region.
Matsukawa, really always good to have you in our studio here in Tokyo. Thank you so much for joining us. Matsukawa, she's Liberal Democratic Party lawmaker, and we'll actually be exploring what Prime Minister Takaichi's election victory also means for Japanese and global markets. Join me and Bloomberg reporters and editors in a live online Q&A at 11 a.m. in Japan, 10 a.m. Hong Kong time. Terminal clients and digital subscribers are invited to sign in and ask our team any questions that you might have.
Let's also take a look at how South Korean assets are faring, particularly these chip-related stocks that are helping to lift the Korean benchmark. It's a case of the Wall Street rebound coming in powerful. Look at how the AI infrastructure-related plays actually fared on the Friday session. U.S. futures also pointing to further upside. And along with that, seeing those gains in Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix as well. Note how the ruling party in South Korea is pushing for a U.S. investment bill by early March. So perhaps some more progress when it comes to Korean investments into the U.S. More ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg. Former Hong Kong media mogul Jimmy Lai is facing sentencing by a Hong Kong court on Monday in a landmark national security case. Lai was found guilty in December on all charges and could face life in prison. Bloomberg's China correspondent Min Lo is at the West Kowloon Court in Hong Kong. Min, what's the atmosphere like outside the court, and what should we be expecting from the sentencing process today?
Yeah, it's a sunny but chilly day here, and as soon as I arrived, I already saw a long line of people wrapped around this court building, hoping to be in the courtroom to witness this seminal moment for Jimmy Lai. The police presence is heavier than usual, even more so than the previous times I've been here to report on the verdict and his trial. And obviously, Jimmy Lai is one of the highest profile cases that has been charged under the national security law. This sentencing will really give us a sense of the reach of the NSL and just how strictly the judges are going to handle this case. Jimmy Lai has been found guilty of one count of publishing seditious material under a colonial-era law that carries a maximum sentence of 2 years. But he also has been found guilty of 2 counts of collusion with foreign forces. That's under the national security law and carries the maximum sentence of life in prison, and a minimal sentence for a grave offense would have been 10 years in prison. But mind you, this is a man who is 78 years old. So even a 20, 30-year sentence could possibly be a life sentence for him. He has already been in solitary confinement for 5 years. His legal team has been appealing for a lighter sentence in the mitigation hearing on account of his old age and his ill health, because his daughter has also been lobbying U.S. lawmakers, citing that he has diabetes, he has high blood pressure, that he has lost weight in prison. So we'll see what happens later this morning.
Yeah, considering all of that, what sort of reaction are we expecting from rights groups as well as governments around the world?
Yes, Shery, there has been a lot of international scrutiny around this case. Obviously, President Trump has been a key figure in lobbying for the release of Jimmy Lai. He mentioned this when he met with President Xi in South Korea, and we'll be closely watching the next summit that will happen in April in Beijing, when he's going to meet with President Xi again, because David Perdue, the U.S. ambassador, has said this is an ongoing conversation. Could there be some sort of outcome from all that lobbying when President Xi and Trump meet in April? So that's something to watch. Of course, you have the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer as well. He visited Beijing last month and also raised the case of Jimmy Lai, because Jimmy Lai is a British citizen, and he has said this is a priority of the UK government. And even the Canadian Prime Minister has been calling for his release as well. But of course, the stance from Beijing has always been that this is the internal affairs of Hong Kong and China, and no other country should have the right to intervene here. And this is despite Western lawmakers accusing Beijing of reneging on its promise of violating on that binding Sino-UK agreement to keep the autonomy and civil liberties of Hong Kong unchanged for at least 50 years after the handover in 1997.
Min Min, thank you so much. Bloomberg China correspondent Min Min Lo live from the West Kowloon Court in Hong Kong. Some other top global headlines we're following. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian says nuclear talks with Washington on Friday were a step forward. The talks mediated by Oman included Iran's foreign minister as well as U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law. Trump characterized the negotiations as very good and says another meeting is set for early this week. Socialist Antonio José Seguro has won Portugal's presidency, defeating far-right challenger André Ventura in a runoff vote. Projections from public broadcaster RTP show Seguro taking up to 73% of the vote. The result is expected to ease tensions with the centre-right government and reduce the risk of institutional confrontation. Let's take a look at how Europe assets are faring as well. We are seeing that tech tailwind underway in Asia following from Wall Street's bounce. Euro Stoxx 50 futures are pointing to upside, but of course the pound is in focus. Suddenly, this political risk is back on the table for Keir Starmer. The UK Prime Minister's political future is in the balance after his chief of staff quit over the appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to Washington. This after revelations over Mandelson's past ties to Jeffrey Epstein. And according to our sources, Downing Street is bracing for cabinet ministers to push for Starmer's resignation. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson. So, Ross, how did he get into such a situation to begin with?
Well, it's interesting, as you say, the whispers around Starmer are getting louder and more public, which suggests that he actually is now in some danger because, of course, the issue around Mandelson has been known for some time, his past links to Jeffrey Epstein, and yet this administration pushed ahead with making him, at least then, the ambassador to the US. The idea was he understood Donald Trump. He'd be able to help the UK navigate the waters of this Trump presidency, which turned out obviously to have been a mistake because all that's really dogged him has been the Epstein issue. And now it's really consuming Starmer's government, the extent to which Keir Starmer knew about Mandelson's long-running ties to Epstein and yet made him ambassador anyway. And so now, of course, his chief of staff has resigned. But does that just in a way blow back against Starmer, because ultimately the person who made this decision was Keir Starmer. And so, of course, his chief of staff has resigned because he suggested that he do it, but the ultimate decision was not his. And so you can see now the noises around Starmer growing ever louder. The concern is this just consumes his government for, the election's not for a couple of years, but he's had several missteps and mistakes in his tenure already. And can he get above this and beyond it and get back to what he wants to talk about, at least in the next couple of weeks? That's very unlikely.
Yeah, so is there a way that he can shore up his position at this point, especially when he does have a couple of local elections also coming up?
Well, that's the question. Can he? Does he bring some of these people into the tent, give them bigger jobs in his government? Would they really want to do that if they're considering challenging him for the leadership? Do they wait to see how these elections go? You've got one by-election in a couple of weeks. You've got a big set of local elections in May. Those tend to go against the national government no matter what. People use them as a chance to give the national government a bit of a kicking, but they could be pretty bad for Labor, especially bad in this case. So do you bide your time, you wait for those to roll through, Starmer takes, he has to take the heat for that outcome no matter what, and then you step in and challenge him. So, would they really want to come into his administration in a bigger way right now if that's what they're really thinking about? In fact, keeping your distance from Starmer might benefit you if you're really thinking of making a leadership challenge and saying you can be the one who can lead Labor, into the next election, which is still some years away, but a lot of ground for Labor to make up either way. So it's very difficult to see what could be the path forward for Starmer here. What can he do to shore up his leadership, with these allegations still rolling on and likely to go on for several months at least.
Ross, thank you so much for bringing us the latest on these developments, the risks surrounding the UK premiership. Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
Take a look at gold back above that $5,000 announced level. Dip buyers coming back to the markets. This, of course, after a historic sell-off. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent now saying that Chinese traders are a reason behind last week's wild swings in the gold market. And Secretary Bessent also expecting the Fed to move cautiously in any effort to trim the balance sheet, and that they're going to take at least a year to decide what to do. And you can see right there that gold has now gained about 5% in the last two sessions, Avril.
Yeah, talking about things that have bounced back, we are seeing, of course, tech doing well in the Japanese, South Korean markets today. And we're watching as well the Hang Seng Tech Index futures pointing to upside there on a day where investors have been digesting the Wall Street moves. Goldman's trading desk says this week could still be choppy, though, given how algos could be at work and they tend to move according with the market direction rather than the fundamental drivers. But it does look like the AI infrastructure rally, which was underway on Wall Street last Friday, is playing through into the Asia Pacific for the moment, Shery.
Yeah, especially here in Japan as well, as we're seeing the tech really sector leading the gains and reacting to the landslide victory by Prime Minister Takaichi as well. So Japanese stocks at record highs, the Nikkei seeing its best day since April. And you can see even the Japanese yen seeing a little bit of strength against the US dollars. We continue to watch JGBs, and we're seeing that sell-off in the long end. Of course, fiscal concerns still abound here in the market. That's it from the Asia trade. The China show is next. This is Bloomberg.